Hello everyone, welcome to the session Object-Oriented Programming through Java. Myself Navya, I'm an assistant professor from the Department of CSIT, Nirmala Institutions of Technology. So, in the previous session, we have seen what is JDBC connectivity and we have seen the architecture of JDBC as well as we have seen types of architecture and how the working of JDBC can be done. We have seen. In the architecture of JDBC, we have seen a concept called JDBC drivers. So, in this session, we are going to learn what is JDBC driver and what are the types of JDBC drivers and what are the advantages of each type of JDBC and what are the disadvantages of each type of JDBC will be seen in this session. Coming to the JDBC driver. So, what is JDBC driver? JDBC drivers is you will have a Java API. In order to interact the Java API, what are the applications you are having through Java API that would be interacted to the database that would be interacted with the databases, and whatever the queries you are sending to Java programming that would be updated, or the data will be changed or updated in the database or created. So, anything, the modifications or anything will be done in database. So, in order to interact with Java applications with the database, there should be an interaction in between them. So, we are going to use drivers. Okay, drivers, JDBC drivers are which is used to keep ready, or which is used to make the data, make the Java program to ready to the to interact with the database. So, here JDBC uses drivers that implement that define interfaces. So, there are 4 types of drivers here, and each driver has its own advantages and disadvantages. So, how the JDBC drivers will work? So, here is a Java application. Here is your here is your Java application. In application, you are going to write the code. So, here this would interact with middleware server. This is a middleware server, and using middleware server, you are going to interact with the database server or databases. So, here they are coming to types of JDBC drivers. There are 4 types of JDBC drivers. The first one is JDBC ODBC driver, which we can call as type 1 drivers, and the second one is native API drivers, which we can call it as type 2 drivers, and the third type is network protocol drivers. This is type 3 drivers, and the fourth one is thin drivers and type 4 drivers. So, here they will interact with the databases in different ways. So, there are 4 types of drivers: JDBC ODBC, network API driver, as well as network protocol driver, and thin drivers. So, coming to the first type of driver. What is the first type of driver? JDBC ODBC bridge driver. So, the name itself, the JDBC ODBC bridge. So, there will be here in the JDBC ODBC, in order to communicate the Java program with the database, we are going to create, or we will build a bridge in between these 2 layers. And here the driver translate the JDBC calls into ODBC connectivity calls, which is a previous one, the first one, which then pass it to ODBC driver to communicate with the database. So, this is the thing. So, whatever the Java application, the Java program what you have written, that would be connected to JDBC ODBC driver. So, that will be the responses will be sent to the ODBC driver, and then based on the vendor database library, it will communicate with the database. So, the response will be given in the same version. The database will be given to vendor database library, and using the library it will react with the ODBC driver, and it will respond to the JDBC ODBC driver, as well as it will respond to the application. So this is about the JDBC ODBC driver. Here, when you look into the advantages and disadvantages, what are the advantages? It is easy to use since we will have an existing ODBC drivers. And the second one is, it's an ideal prototyping and testing purposes. There is no DT driver is available. And coming to the disadvantages, what are the disadvantages? So it's when you see the architecture, you can see there was a long process when you are connected from Java to database. So Java JDBC to ODBC and ODBC to database. So before JDBC you will write the Java programming. So when you compare, the performance will relatively slow due to double translation. And the next one, it requires an ODBC installation on the client machine, and which will be cumbersome. And here you can have a problem of limited platform compatibility. So mostly it works well on Windows, but it might not work in other operating systems. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of JDBC ODBC bridge drivers. And Sun Microsystems, now it is called as Oracle, that was deprecated this driver. So this is also one of the drawback of JDBC ODBC driver. Coming to the second type of driver is native API driver. What is native API driver? So here in native API driver, the JDBC, whatever the JDBC statements are there, that would be calls into the database specific calls used native client side libraries provided by the database vendor. So how it look like is, so here in previous one you will have the JDBC as well as ODBC driver. Here the Java application directly connects to native API driver, and that would be connected to the vendor database library. Using this, the request has been sent to the database. In the same way, whatever the database response, the same thing will be communicated with vendor database library, and that would be communicated with native API driver, and that would be communicated to the results will be published in the Java application. So this is what the type 2 driver is. When we look into the advantages, what are the advantages of when you compare with the type 1? This will give you the better performance, and it reduces the overhead of ODBC. So you don't have the ODBC here. And the second point is takes an advantage database specific features, potentially offering better performance and functionality. So these are the two advantages of native API driver. Coming to the disadvantages, it requires native database libraries, isn't it? So in order to use a native API driver, you has to have the native database libraries should be installed in your system. And the second point is, and it was a platform different, because different version of the drivers may be required for different operating systems. So it's in platform dependent is one of the disadvantages of this. And the next one is, the maintenance can be challenging due to dependency of native code. So the dependency of native code is a challenging thing. So that went to the disadvantage of this. And coming to the third type of driver, network protocol driver. Here in the network protocol driver, what would you have? You will, instead of native vendor database library, we are using a middleware. Okay, and we are using here 3-tier architecture, and here the middle tier server converts the JDBC calls into the database specific protocols, and the client side driver communicates with the middle server, and this whatever the request you are sending through this, that would be communicated with database, and the same thing where the responses will be called to the Java application. So let us see what are the advantages and disadvantages. Coming to the advantages, here in network protocol layer, there is no client-side library installation would be happening, because we are using the middleware, isn't it? So there is no need to install library, vendor database library. So this would be happen in type 3 driver itself. And the second advantage is it will be suitable for internet and intranet applications, and it will work well over network connections. But when it comes to the offline, it might be difficult. So coming to the disadvantages. Sorry, you are having one more advantages. Provides a flexible, high performance solution with a middleware server that can handle tasks like load balancing and caching. So what are load balancing and caching will be happen. So it might lead to the high performance solution, as we are using the middleware services. And here, when it comes to the disadvantages, so we know we has to have a middleware server, and it will add a layer of complexity, and the potential might get failure. So it might, so the layer of complexity, it adds a layer of complexity, and the potential points to failure sometimes. And the second one is, it can vary depending on network. Exactly. So if it will work over internet or intranet, so that would be happen. If you have an internet low depends on internet, low net, or if your internet is not working, it might sometimes work and it sometimes not work, isn't it? So it depends on network, first one, and the second is the efficiency of the middleware server also it happens. So these two are the disadvantages of this particular network protocol layer. Configuration and maintenance of middleware server might be complex. So you has to maintain the middleware server, and you has to check its configurations and the maintenance of these middleware servers, and it might cost. Coming to the fourth type of driver, which is thin drivers. So here this driver converts JDBC calls directly to the data specific protocol without any intermediate translation or middleware. So without any middleware or intermediate translation, we are going to connect to the database. So previously in the Java database ODBC driver, JDBC ODBC driver, you are having JDBC, ODBC and vendor library. And when coming to that might be more complex when compared to type 2. Type 2, you are having native API drivers and native API, and you have the middleware. When it comes to the third one, network protocol layer, in the network protocol layer, network protocol driver communicates with the middleware, isn't it? So when it communicates with the middleware, there are two in the middle, so that the communication might be easier than the first two. But what was the difference? So when you does not have the internet, so internet or intranet, it can't work beyond the internet and beyond the intranet. So that was the basic disadvantages of all the three. Coming here, when you are using the thin drivers, it directly interacts with the database. So the thin drivers directly interact with the database. What are the what are the requests you can send through driver, that would be directly implemented on the database, and the responses will be happen to client machine. So which you are having data specific protocol without any intermediate translations or middleware. So this was very when coming to four drivers, first they have gone with JDBC, ODBC, native API, network protocol layer. When it comes to the thin drivers, there was no middleware services which is used to connect the JDBC and database. Here you can connect directly. So this was in thin drivers. coming to the advantages and disadvantages. Coming to the advantages. So, the best performance, I can say it was a best performance. Why? It does not have any unnecessary layers. It directly contacted with database, and the response that could be handled by, that could be transferred, the responses directly translated or communicated with the JDBC. And the second one is it's pure Java implementation, and it's a platform independent. So there was a good point, platform independent, it can run on any machine. And the third point is there is no need of client side libraries. This is also a plus point. In the last first and second drivers, we are going to use a Java database, vendor database libraries. Here in the type 4, there is no need of client side libraries. And the fourth point is you can easily deploy and maintain this one. Why? Because there is no native code or no middleware. So there is no service of middleware or no native code in between the Java and database connectivity. So there is no need to maintain or sustain, or you has to extend these services. So there is you can say that was easy to deploy and you can maintain it easily. And coming to the disadvantages, it might have a disadvantage. So it's in vendor specific, which is nothing but you need different driver for each database. If I'm using SQL, I has to use a MySQL driver, as well as if I was using Oracle as a database, if I'm choosing my database is Oracle, I has to go with Oracle driver, as well as if I'm using some other thing, some other database, I has to use that specific driver for this program. So vendor specific, that would be the disadvantage. And the next one is limited to the functionality exposed by a driver. If the driver lacks certain features, so your application will be the same. So limited to the functionality. And the third disadvantage is initial setup might require. In order to execute these programs, the initial setup has to be done before in prior itself. So coming to the summary of this session, we have seen the type 1 drivers, the drivers of JDBC. First type of driver is JDBC ODBC driver. In simply you can say it is simple, and it was deprecated by Sun Microsystems, and it was platform department, and it was slow. Second one is the type 2 drivers, which is native API driver. It can perform better performance than type 1, and it requires native libraries, and it was platform dependent. It is also a platform dependent. Coming to the type 3 network protocol, and this was related to middleware, and it's flexible and it suits for network applications, and it has a complex setup and complex maintenance also of a middleware. Coming to the type 4 drivers, thin drivers, best performance, it can give you the best performance, and it was pure Java application, and it is platform independence. What was the drawback of this is just it was a database specific. So you need to install that database specific driver before, and you have to install the whatever the drivers you when you are using the JDBC connection. In order to use that program, in order to use thin drivers, you has to install that database specific drivers into your client system. That was the 4 types of drivers. And what are the 4 types of drivers, what are the advantages of the drivers, and what are the disadvantages of drivers we have seen in this session. Thank you everyone.